Good morning, everyone.
Gallows humor, Eric.
I love it. You can get
I
as
don't even know
dark
if I'm
as
trying
you
to
want.
be funny. I think it's just, Oh, hey, what's up, everybody? A happy, cheerful morning here before the start of the NFL Strategy Show. But we are, as always, happy to have you with us. Welcome to the Strategy Show presented by Prize Picks. We're taking a first look at ownership. We're midway through the week. Got a little Thursday night football tomorrow that Matt and I will be covering bright and early. But for now, Sunday main slate, only 10 games, which is kind of exciting. I like these abbreviated slates, 4 teams on a bye. You got another London game. So we're cutting it down a little bit, and we're here to break it all down. I'm Dave Loughran at Laffy_D on Twitter, joined by Eric Lindquist at Eric Lindquist and Matt Gajeski at Matt_Gajeski. Matt, week 6 already, man. We're cruising through this season.
It's how NFL always goes, man. It's crazy. It feels like the offseason takes forever than it gets here, and we just fly through it. Luckily, we do have these huge showdown contests now, so it's not just like the main slate. We have 6 days off. We actually get some in between, and those slates have been awesome this year. But of course, I'm excited for the main slate as always.
Me too. And I tell you, Eric, I was looking, and good morning to all of you guys in chat, everybody hanging out with us once again. I was looking over Fantasy Cruncher lineup study, which is just, I think you'd agree, an invaluable tool. It's awesome, right? We have the Monday morning show with Eric and Adam where they break everything down from a week in review, and I love it. I miss being on that. I wish I was still on that show because it was a lot of fun, and it gets you started off and really gives you some good ideas. But I looked at the Millie Maker. 26 of the top 40 lineups had played 3 or fewer lineups. There were only 7 in the top 40 that had 10 plus lineups. I think only 2 with 150. And the winning lineup was Tom Brady at 6%, Madison at 35, Chuba Hubbard at 6, Antonio Brown at 15, Devontae Adams at 24, Mike Evans at 5, Hunter Henry at 4, Kadarius Toney at 11, and the Vikings at 8.1. And it occurred to me, first of all, there's no run back, which is totally fine. It was just a Brady with 2 wide receiver stack. But also, even though some of these guys had low ownership, I don't see a single egregious play in this entire lineup.
No, and that's really what we're doing here with these shows in the morning, and is trying to give people ideas for how to construct lineups. And what you said right there, only 3 lineups for some of these top end guys. It is within your grasp to make winning lineups. It's within your grasp, not just with tools here, but just talking strategy, going through the process of finding 6, 5, 4% plays. You know, even the Vikings under 10%, there were some pivots off of other teams that were even chalkier than that. And that's still a place in your lineup. So when we're talking about NFL, and there's correlation there between the defense and the running back, which, you know, again, that pops up from time to time. But I just love when you see some of these 3 entry people, 4 entries get there, because it just proves that making correct lineups, making lineups that have the possibility of doing it, it could be you.
Yeah, absolutely. Clayton Esky says, had a bear in the yard this morning looking to get fed. We named him Allen Robinson. Poor bastard. We'll talk about Allen Robinson today for sure. Not pulling much ownership, but that's solid. Matt, how about the $12 single entry fair catch? I like breaking these down too, because it's a $300,000 prize play. I think it's $30K up top. Again, Brady, Evans, and Antonio Brown. That was the secret recipe. It wasn't even a secret. I mean, shit, they were facing Miami, but 5% own Brady, 5% own Mike Evans, 5% own Mike Evans, which once again goes to show you that everyone worrying about wide receiver cornerback matchups oftentimes gets burned. And then Antonio Brown at 13, but you also had Kadarius Toney in there, Madison as well, Washington defense. But then here's where he went different. Austin Eckler at 6.9%, Ezekiel Elliott at 8.9%, and then Mike Gesicki at 18.8. So we had the run back, but that run back was probably the most and I don't say this in a disparaging way, but probably the most meaningless aspect of that lineup.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great lineup overall. I think a lot of people still are afraid to play some of the Tampa Bay receivers. If you're stacking, I think, and especially if you're running multiple lineups, you just mix and match them. But in last week in particular, without Gronkowski, who has just an amazing role in the red zone, and they've showed really no issues whatsoever moving that role over to the wide receivers. They're just not using OJ Howard, Cameron Brate in that capacity. So you had an even more narrow target distribution. You had a more narrow potential red zone distribution, and that certainly paid off. The rest of the lineup, fantastic too. With some of the injuries to Miami, I mean, using Gesicki as a tight end, he basically is a glorified wide receiver out there playing in the slot. He actually doesn't line up as a tight end hardly at all. I don't have the figures in front of me, but he might even be like single digit snaps playing from the in-line alignment this year. Great lineup overall for whoever won that. I'm not sure if he said the name.
I didn't. No, I don't know who it is, but congratulations.
Well, congrats to them. It's a really good construction.
It was E. Larson 0212. I guess we'll give him a shout out. Why not? Matt, are you excited to break down tomorrow's Eagles Bucs game? It's going to be nuts.
Oh, dude, I love showdown slates.
And that one, I mean, my God, just you talk about a pass funnel defense. It's like pass funnel on steroids. So yeah, be there with us. We'll do a ton of showdown content throughout the day. I guess it's about that time, Eric. Start talking ownership for week 6.
Yeah, let's ride.
All right. First things first, before we get in the running backs. Why is it that somehow Travis Kelce's price has come down to $7,000 on DraftKings? Zeke's 85, or sorry, Tyreek Hill's 85, which is fine, but this is going to be probably the easiest week we have to stack the Kansas City Chiefs, and actually might be possible to do it with Hill and Kelce, because Kelce's down $1,500 from where he was just a couple weeks back.
Yeah, and it's at a position that is just garbage. It's a garbage position every single week. So at 7K, I mean, yeah, he's going to just stick out like a sore thumb. And right now in our first run of ownership, I saw that he was the guy that jumped all the way to the top, and it completely makes sense. He hasn't had a game over 21 fantasy points in his last 3, coming out of the gate pretty strong, but it's just kind of been an afterthought a little bit in this offense, not to say, whatever else, but you have Tyreek Hill dropping passes. You have Hardman dropping passes. They're getting tipped. Pick 6 is going back the other way. It's been very strange watching the Kansas City Chiefs offense struggle. And, I think he's going to right the ship here. Washington is a great spot. This defense is definitely not what we expected it to be, but at 7K, yeah, he's going to be a big part of this slate. And it's going to be very, very difficult to figure out what else you want to do at that position. But we do have pivots, Mark Andrews up top there, coming off of just an absolute bazooka. I mean, out of the middle of nowhere. It's been like a year and a half we've been begging for something like this, and it finally came to fruition. So this might be the first time I can remember all season long where playing 2 tight ends might be viable.
Wide receivers, tight ends, top stacks. We're getting into all of that on today's show, but let's kick it off with running backs, Matt. Darrell Henderson right now pulling the highest projected ownership on the slate. There's no better place to start than here, right? Sony Michel got worked in last week, and then even had a goal line carry late in the game after Henderson was back to full strength, I guess you could say. But they are facing a very beat up Giants team. I would love to hear where you're at on the split that we saw last week, and how much of that do you think was due to Darrell Henderson getting banged up, and how much of it was Sony Michel comes in because he's briefly banged up, but then Sony Michel is crushing and they keep him in for the entire drive?
Sony Michel has played really well when he's been given opportunities. I think it's almost to the point where, I mean, both running backs have been great, but Sony Michel playing as well as he has, you want to at least give him change of pace opportunities, especially when early in the year, Darrell Henderson did have that full workload and he hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy. He's just been getting nicked up, obviously missed the game, and he's in and out of drives because he cannot stay healthy. He continues to get nicked up. With that said, I still think that Darrell Henderson at his price handles a majority of the work. Even last week when he did get banged up, you saw him out there for most of the snaps. He played just shy of 66%, had a fairly large workload, and now you're just adding in a fantastic matchup where the Rams, while the game doesn't have a great overall total, because they're such heavy favorites at 10.5 points, their implied team total at 29 is still among the best on the slate. So it's certainly a spot where I think Darrell Henderson is someone you can target. And even at his ownership right now, 17%, right now it looks like this slate is going to be a little more evened out compared to what we had last week with, the chalky Madison, the chalky Henry. I'm okay taking some shots if he's 17% owned.
Yeah, I am too. And really, it is flat up here, Eric. You've got him, you've got McCaffrey at around 16%, Eckler around 16, Swift at 15. I mean, a lot of these guys are pulling similar ownership. Where do you stand at the top of the position?
So at the top of the position, it's Austin Eckler for me. He gets it done in every single game script. I mean, we're looking at a guy, 22 and a half fantasy points or more his last 4, 30 plus in his last 2. He gets so much receiving volume. He's now had a receiving touchdown in 3 consecutive. He continues to get work on the ground. Baltimore, we're seeing this defense. I said that, a couple of weeks back, where Baltimore's defense is not whatever preconceived notions you had about them. They're different. And they showed that against the Colts when Carson Wentz actually carved them up early on in that game and ended up shooting out completely. That game is going to be so much fun. But Austin Eckler feels like a guy who could absorb a ton of that production. If you wanted to get away from the Mike Williams, the Keenan Allens, the Justin Herbert, I mean, Austin Eckler is a guy who can just eat up and absorb so much of that game. So I'm looking at him as somebody that at still sub 8K, that's underpriced for what his role is on this team.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I actually thought Eckler would be getting a little bit less ownership, Matt, just given some of the options on this slate. But for me, Christian McCaffrey. Now, I know we got to talk about Kansas City. We will talk about Kansas City. Eric already teased some of that a second ago. But if Christian McCaffrey comes back at full capacity and 8,800, is this not a $10,000 player?
I think he should be similar to like Derrick Henry's price. I don't know if we'll ever get like the 10K running backs on DraftKings again, unless McCaffrey literally starts eating up 12 target games, just because the receivers are so strong. If you ever had a running back at like 10K, they would.
He was 9,900 in week 2.
Right. And he was like, I can't remember the cheat plays, but unless you have like the pure min, like backup running back punt plays, they're almost like auto fades because of opportunity cost. Even Eckler, who I think his role's a bit different this year. You're seeing him above 70% of the snaps in a lot of these games. It's not that 50-50 timeshare he was in with like Melvin Gordon in the past. His role is larger. If you can grab like 90% of Christian McCaffrey and save $2,000, which isn't the case here, but if you could, it would almost make Christian McCaffrey like an auto fade to me, assuming there's just not the punt plays. The main question with McCaffrey I have here is, what is his role going to be coming back from injury? And we've seen in the past that Carolina is not hesitant to throw him out into just a full workload right away. I think that may be different considering last year they did that twice. Both times Christian McCaffrey went back on IR. So I think they may be a little bit more hesitant, which leaves me wary of McCaffrey, not only his price, but what is his potential role?
So I think he'll be at 130% personally.
Health?
Yeah. He got through a full practice last week on Friday without any setbacks or limitations. So to me, it feels like it was more precautionary to hold him out. You have Matt Rule probably saying, hey, I don't want to risk this and lose a guy that is our offense or the large majority of our offense for an extended period of time like we did last year. We're facing the Eagles. We should be able to handle them. That didn't come to fruition. But you see where I'm going with this. Like, he got through practice. He said he was good to go. So I think this was just a decision.
He always says that.
I know. I hear you. But what I'm saying is, like, I think it was a decision from up top. If he practiced, which he did without any problems, where it's like, listen, just sit out one more week, come back next week and be at 100%. That's my interpretation of it, at least.
Yeah, I think if that's where you go, I think that's solid. And I mean, just to like Eric's point with Eckler, and everything's going to change, ownership and our projections. But right now, Austin Eckler actually has a higher projection than Christian McCaffrey. Again, I'm not behind the scenes. I'm not sure what his projected workload is for me, but these are like the main tools I'm using to build my lineups. So if like given the choice, all things considered, I'm going to save some of that salary, especially with some of the options we have in the middle price range. With Christian McCaffrey, I still think there is a little bit of uncertainty here. You bring up really good points about him with the full practice. That's obviously positive for him, but there's a lot of running backs with really solid roles where you don't have to pay nearly 9K.
Sure. There's still some other guys that are relatively chalky right now too, Eric. And one of those is DeAndre Swift. It's so weird with Swift because he's not getting the bulk of carries on the ground, but he is getting the goal line work and the inside the 10-yard line work. Not all of it, but he's double. He has 100. He has 4 goal line carries to Jamal Williams 2 this year, and he's the clear pass catching back. But he's going to be pretty popular this week.
Yeah, and 75% of snaps, 73% of snaps the last 2 weeks. They've been in, for all intents and purposes, competitive games here. They should probably be a 2-3 football team at this point, which is just kind of crazy to say out loud. But it's hard not to like a little bit DeAndre Swift. He's underpriced 6,300 as well. I think there's a lot of running backs that are maybe a little bit underpriced, and I think DK has done a pretty good job of pricing throughout the season, especially at the running back position. I mean, obviously the floor is elevated to 4K, but it seems like they preemptively price up guys like even Madison, even though he was an absolute smash. At least they're pushing the price up on some of these guys. And DeAndre Swift, though, just feels like it hasn't really accounted for some of these games where he could have, if you add another touchdown into the mix here, had a 30 burger, a 35 burger that would really break some of these slates. You're running into a Cincinnati team that, again, if they're going to be pushing the ball here, if Cincinnati's going to be getting a lead and, Detroit's going to be coming from behind in a lot of these games, you said it's pretty clear that he's the pass catching back here now with 5+ targets in every single game this season. The volume is there for him. The rushing attempts, I would love to see come up a little bit because it feels like it's almost impossible for him to hit some of these bonuses on DK because he won't get enough receiving volume or rushing volume to hit 100. Kind of reminds me of like Eckler maybe 2 years ago, where you definitely need to get a touchdown in the mix there too. But you got to be thinking week in, week out, DeAndre Swift is the most likely to score on this team.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. However, Matt, I have where we stand right now in ownership. We know it's in flux. It changes throughout the week. All of that's understood. But I have the best pivot off of DeAndre Swift if this ownership stays the way it is, and he's in the same exact game. If Joe Mixon actually comes in at 6%, I will have egregious amounts of him. I know he only had 10 carries and 11 total touches, but he only played 18 snaps. So Zach Taylor was making a concerted effort to say, all right, you're only going to be on the field for 28% of the plays, but when you're out there, we're going to get you the ball. If he is back to full strength against the Detroit team that's allowed more fantasy points to running backs in the league this year, or than anyone in the league this year, I am very likely going to have just an absurd amount of Joe Mixon at 6% at the same price.
Yeah, I like Joe Mixon a lot. Health is the obvious concern.
Right.
I think a secondary concern for him is that he could start losing pass game work to Chris Evans. It's hard to sort of disentangle whether it was Evans out there just out of necessity because Mixon's playing this limited role, and Samaje Perine is not exactly a premier pass catching back himself, but also working in Mixon's favor. You have Perine on the COVID list, and Chris Evans at the end of the day is still a day 3 rookie. How much do they really want to dedicate to him? Plus, Mixon has shown solid ability as a pass catcher in the past. He just hasn't always played that role. To your point, if people are scared of the injury as well, I'm probably going to take a stand going over the field on Mixon. And at his current ownership, how much do you really need of him to take a major stand? It's not looking like very much.
Yeah, right. And another thing too, I'm glad you mentioned Perine. He might play, he might not play. I don't know. If he's vaccinated, he'll have time to get off of the COVID-19 list. But it's also possible, Eric, and I don't know where you're at on Mixon. I don't know where you're at on these pivots, but that we just see a very similar situation as we've seen against the Lions in many weeks, where teams can throw, but they can also run. So you get the David Montgomery game where Fields doesn't need to throw more than 18 times, or Minnesota where Alexander Madison does a ton of work on the ground. You've seen this so often where teams just absolutely destroy them. Even Green Bay, Aaron Jones wasn't getting all the work on the ground, but it was basically just an extension of the run. So I don't know. They're a horrible football team.
Yeah, but I'm just not there. I get what you guys are saying, but for me, we're seeing 28% of offensive snaps. I mean, he's obviously not right last week. We'll just write that off here ahead of time here. Samaje Perine, much more involved there. Chris Evans, I don't really know what that role is. I mean, Perine being out would definitely be a huge plus for him. I can't see it any other way than that, but it just doesn't feel like this team is going to be very heavy with the run going forward. I mean, we look at some of their advanced metrics stuff that we have for the advanced stats page. And, Cincinnati is just a team that is kind of middle of the road in terms of rushing volume. And Joe Mixon has just been a workhorse back on a terrible football team for a long time. And I think Cincinnati is just more competitive here now. And a lot of that is just adding Chase into the mix, having Higgins get healthy. You obviously just have so many premier players on the offensive side, just pass catchers, that it's difficult for me to really think that they're going to rely extremely heavily on him. I mean, this would be the spot that you would just say, all right, we jam against Detroit, but they're only 3.5-point favorites. I think this game is maybe competitive more than other people might. You have every pass catcher in the world out for Detroit, but they've been in some competitive games here of late and overachieved, I would say, in some of their game scripts. And I just don't know if Joe Mixon is still not right. This isn't a game maybe where they unleash him the same way. I mean, they just kind of give Joe Burrow the ball and let him go.
Just to play devil's advocate, Mixon has the second most rushing attempts in the league, and he only had 10 last week.
Right. And I get that too. I mean, Derrick Henry is just an outlier, so we're not even going to go there.
142 to Mixon's 93, and it's
so
first and
dumb.
second.
I was going to say, I mean, I had that thing last week where I was just looking at the pace of carries for Derrick Henry. I was just very, very curious about that. And Derrick Henry looking to exceed the record by 40 carries here on his current pace, which is just silliness. But Joe Mixon, I mean, yeah, he saw a ton of volume in week 1, 29 rushes, and they just kept feeding him there against Minnesota. That was pretty darn effective. But Minnesota's not going to be able to stop a lot of people on the defensive side of the ball. And yeah, Detroit probably isn't either, but they've shown a little bit more here. And now that you kind of get T. Higgins back in the mix here, it's just another guy where this entire offense can do so much through the air. Joe Burrow has really proven that he could be a real dude in this league. So we'll have to keep an eye on that with Joe Mixon. Keep an eye on his health for sure. Keep an eye on Samaje Perine. A lot of question marks, and maybe you're right. Maybe that's somebody that I get to. But if the slate started right now and you told me Samaje Perine was in, I'd probably have no interest in Mixon.
Henry had what? 378 rushes. This is a 17-game season. He's on pace for 483 carries.
What in the world?
483.
Yeah, I could not really believe what they were doing to this guy. And he stays healthy the whole time. How does he stay healthy the whole time?
It's amazing. Like, I picked up Jeremy McNichols in some dynasty lineups because it's like, what happens if Derrick Henry goes down?
Yeah, he just never does. He's a tank.
Matt, what do you think of some of the other pivots, maybe some lower owned guys? And feel free to touch on some of these like middle of the road ownership players like Cook, which we don't have a good read. We don't know if he's playing, but Devontae Booker, Aaron Jones, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, I think some people will try to grab one of the cheap running backs, and we'll have to wait for some injury news. Booker looks like he's going to be the clear lead back for New York, and he essentially functioned in that role last week. It's just you have a New York team implied for under 20 points. They're going up against the Rams as 10.5-point underdogs. And you can play a guy even a little bit cheaper in like a Darrell Williams, who received most of the meaningful touches after Clyde Edwards-Helaire went down. Again, we're dealing with a really small sample, and there's a chance that Jerick McKinnon does function in this offense, at least in a change pace role, maybe a pass catching role. We're not really sure, but he's another back that's really cheap at 4,900 on DraftKings specifically, someone I'll have interest in. And then, of course, a pivot in that range that I always like to target is Chase Edmonds, just because he plays for an explosive offense. It has been really frustrating that he doesn't have that red zone role. You saw James Conner go out there and punch in some more touchdowns last week, but Edmonds always does have the big playmaking ability. He reminds me of like a cheaper Kareem Hunt in an explosive offense. I like taking some shots on him. He's not a guy I usually take a huge stand on, but always have a little bit just because of the game environment that Arizona is playing in. And again, this week, 3-point underdogs to Cleveland in a game with a 53-point total.
Eric, do you think 5,400 on a guy like Devontae Booker is too much or too little? Because the matchup sucks, right? There's no doubt about that. They're graded out as number 1 ranked run defense. The Rams are, but Booker played 99% of snaps that Barkley wasn't out there. No, actually, I think he played 100% of the snap. No, all but one. Elijah Penny, I'm sorry, got one snap.
He got one
after Barkley went down. And Devontae Booker ran a route on 73% of dropbacks. It might have even been 81%. I think it was 81. I'm sorry. So he's clearly going to be involved. And last year when Wayne Gallman was the starter from week 7 through 14, he was the RB6 in the league in PPR formats. Is there enough volume here? Because that's what we're going to need to get Devontae Booker over the top at his price point.
I think so. And I'm pretty high on him. I'm pretty high on Darrell Williams. I kind of look at them a little bit the same way, where they're acquiring a backfield and they're going to get a majority. But the difference between the two, and the reason there's a $500 discrepancy, I would assume, is that you have Jerick McKinnon on the Kansas City side. And for a guy like Devontae Booker right now, I just don't know who else it could possibly be. And Devontae Booker, going back to, you referred to as Vegas here last year, 507 yards from scrimmage, 110 touches, basically 5 yards a touch, gets receiving work going back to his Denver days. I think he can be an adequate pass catcher for PPR formats where, he's never seen over 38 total targets, but he's had 30 plus catches 3 times in his career. So I think that role is going to be still his. And so as long as you're getting a lead back who gets the pass catching role and not the inverse where he's basically just going to be on the ground and you need to just have him outperform against a Rams defense that is not exactly one we're looking to pick on. I think because of the pass game role that he's definitely somebody that if he ends up adding a touchdown to 6 or 7 catches, I mean, you could be looking at a guy at 5,400 who could definitely break the slate at 90% plus touches.
Matt, Antonio Gibson's dealing with a stress fracture in his shin, but he got 20 carries last week, and now he faces arguably the worst defense in the league. Are you willing to take some shots there in a deep 6K range at running back?
Yeah, I'll definitely take some shots on him. The injury is concerning, but I think if anything, it's going to lower his ownership, and it hasn't really prohibited him whatsoever. I think we all expected, at least to some degree, a timeshare with J.D. McKissic coming into the year. At least I did. J.D. McKissic's function in that pass catching role for over a long sample now. And you still have Antonio Gibson playing largely the role we expected. So I don't really know how much it's hindering him out there. He's had big plays. He's been somewhat efficient. I'll definitely take stabs on him in a game environment that is just, it's the best game environment on the entire slate.
It really is.
And Kansas City's defense is just straight up brutal. Chris Jones is battling an injury too. We'll see if he's back or not, but that could be maybe a factor you look at. He's the best run defender that team has, and he missed their last game.
And Gibson still has like 82% of the all running back rushing attempts. So there's nobody else in the backfield in terms of rushing downs that are going to get there. Dan Sorensen, I mean, this is a problem, Matt. Like, I think Tyrann Mathieu might kill him on the field if there's another blown coverage. I think he might murder him.
That was bad. I'm sure you saw like the Twitter picture, Tyrann with his hands in the air.
Yeah. Someone made a whole, put together every clip of him being pissed off at Sorensen for blown coverage. There's like 18 of them this year of him just going like this.
Yeah. Honey Badger's pissed.
And they haven't been good at run defense either. Like, so Sorensen just giving up the big plays. I mean, it's the dagger in the coffin already, but I mean, if they want to approach this game on the ground, they absolutely can.
I think so too. Eric, any final thoughts on running back?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering it. Chase Edmonds, I like pairing him with Kyler Murray. I was kind of thinking about if there's going to be some kind of a ceiling there, I like kind of where I can get a little bit different with some of these backs and combining them with my quarterback. And he kind of sticks out to me in that same game too. I mean, we haven't seen JD McKissic have the kind of role, but if they're going to be coming from behind their 7-point dogs here, they've been in some competitive games. And just as a direct pivot off Gibson, I think JD McKissic in like super large fields does make some sense as well on the other side of it. If he, can get to that 5-6 target range even and get in the box underneath 5K, he could make some kind of sense as a pivot. And kind of rounding it out, Aaron Jones, I just never know what to do with him anymore. He ended up getting over 100 yards and kind of bailed me out in a couple lineups there, but looks like Dylan is starting to cut in a little bit. He still had 70% of the running back touches, but I mean, paying 7,300 for that just feels like pretty dumb to do when you can get 90% plus production at the 5K range.
I got to be honest. I don't feel great about that AJ Dillon involvement in this offense.
It's awful. Yeah, it's awful. And AJ Dillon also showing up in goal line situations. That's just not ideal. Not ideal.
It's not fun at all.
Unfun. Yes.
He ran 10 routes. Aaron Jones was still 29 last game, but still, I mean, Dillon was targeted on 40% of his routes. So I don't know. Jones still saw 5. Let me ask you guys something. Does Tyrann Mathieu have the best nickname in the league?
Yeah, Honey Badger. It's pretty good.
It's a great nickname, right? I mean, it really is. No, Matt, not feeling it. The Honey Badger.
No, dude, I have his jersey from LSU.
Do you?
I love him.
Oh, it's such a good nick.
His special teams involvement in college was just outrageous. I mean, was there a more dynamic player in the last 10 years on special teams?
Devin Hester.
Oh, okay. Well, in college, 10 years.
No.
There we go. Yeah,
I don't
it was
think
unreal.
So. I think
it was
you're
unreal.
Right.
Devin Hester was, oh my God, man.
Tavon Austin.
Tavon Austin was pretty saucy. That guy was nuts.
In college,
he was nuts.
Remember when they tried to convert Devin Hester to a receiver and it failed miserably?
Couldn't catch anything. It was incredible.
Not good. it was really bad.
It was like watching Cordarrelle Patterson. It's the same thing, but now apparently Cordarrelle Patterson is the second graded halfback on PFF. So what do I know? Nothing.
He's the RB3 in PPR formats this year.
Just drop kick me in the face.
I mean,
I hate unbelievable.
I hate my life. RB3.
And I have him on like every team, and I'm still tilting this dude.
Oh, it's crazy. Matt, I don't even know if he was drafted in any of the best ball drafts we did that are 18 rounds.
Dude, I don't think so. Because a lot of people thought Kadri Allison might be the handcuff.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It just wasn't a clear backfield behind it, Mike Davis. And that, like, now he's one of the best gadget players, I think, in the entire NFL because of lineup at receiver. They'll use him there. They'll use him out of the backfield. His involvement has been crazy. He's not like 100% snap share guy, but when he's out there, you talk about a guy who has plays designed for him. He certainly does.
It's crazy. We got 400 people watching. I don't think I've asked yet, but hey, well, I don't even have to. We're almost at 100 likes already. So much appreciated to everybody. It'd be cool to get it over 100 and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Powering our way to 70,000 thanks to you. And had a lot of new people join the channel, get those sweet custom badges, custom emojis, some other good stuff along the way. If you want to do that, fine by me. If not, I get it. But hit that thumbs up. Take a second out of your day as you watch this content and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, because it's still like half the people that watch our shows have not subscribed. If all of you guys had subscribed, I'd never even ask you to do it. So it's a thought. I mean, it's worth considering. Just, go in on this together, make it 100%, and then we're golden. All right. Wide receivers. Oh, wait, actually, I almost forgot. Our sponsor, Prize Picks. Eric, you've heard of Prize Picks.
I have heard of them once or twice.
Yeah, they're doing some good stuff over there.
They are. It's beautiful site.
It is. It looks good. It makes you feel good. And, well, when do you feel better than winning money? It's very simple. It's a daily prop-based contest. There's no sharks. There's no MME. There's no optimizers. Just you and your research and the shows you watch and your overall general knowledge of the sports. But in all seriousness, everything you use for DraftKings or FanDuel or Yahoo or wherever you play, right? Everything you're using in terms of betting for the week, all of that knowledge and research. And if intuition, if you so please, if you're one of those people, fine by me. All of that can be applied to Prize Picks. That's the best part. You don't have to go and be like, let me designate 3 hours of my day for Prize Picks. You don't have to, because you already have that knowledge. You're already equipped with all of that research when you head over there. If you go and download it in the App Store or in the Google Play Store or go to prizepicks.com, it all looks real nice. This is all you have to do, right? You pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players. So props, over, under, there's no line. There's no juice on any of these either, which is an amazing way to find an edge. If you're comparing them to other sites that have heavy juice on the over or under, you know exactly where to go. You put them onto one lineup, okay? If you correctly pick a 5-player lineup, you can net up to 10x your entry fee. And they have the cross-sport lineups too. If you know basketball and baseball and football or esports or WNBA, whatever it is, you can put all of them into one single lineup and win it that way as well. So take advantage of that. Check it out. Use the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, to get up to $100 instant match deposit bonus when you sign up using the promo code Awesemo. And, well, let us know what you think. It's a great way to build your bankroll and make some money over there at Prize Picks. All right, Matt, let me flip this over to you, wide receiver. No surprise to any of us that Tyreek Hill is getting a lot of ownership. Even at that price point, this matchup against Washington just feels really quite tasty.
Yeah, Washington's defense has not been as good as we suspected this year. That comes down to a lot of factors, not only their pass coverage, but I mean, their pass rush hasn't gotten there as much, even with some marquee names on the defensive line. And dude, matchups really matter for Tyreek Hill at this point. The dude is just so good and he's being targeted at such a high rate in this offense that it hasn't really mattered. As far as the options at the top, you do have to make some really tough decisions. Tyreek Hill is right in the same price range as Devontae Adams. Cooper Kupp has had a ridiculous target share this year. And even though he didn't have the fantastic game last week, he was still targeted at a really high rate. And you can't play all three. So I actually like taking stands on these three in tournaments in stacks because none of them project to have that immense, like 30% ownership we saw Devontae Adams have last week. So I think you can pick and choose your elite receivers in your stacks for tournaments.
Maybe the most disappointing defense in the league this year, Eric, compared to expectations coming into the season?
Yeah, I don't think it's close. They're the exact inverse of the Dallas Cowboys, where you just kind of didn't expect anything out of Dallas and they're showing up and making turnovers happen. I don't even know what's going on because you look at Washington's defensive line and it should be effective. It should be easy for them to get after the quarterback, and rushing the quarterback is one of the most predictive things you can find for turnovers, and they're just not getting it done. So it's been difficult in all facets for them. And then their secondary has just definitely been gettable. I think it makes a lot of sense going to Tyreek Hill here in this spot. The Chiefs are 2-3. I think that only helps. You saw them coming off of a loss, going into Philadelphia and just laying the hammer down. I think you could see something very, very similar here against Washington, as long as guys are catching passes. I mean, has there been more flukish interceptions for a guy this entire season than what Patrick Mahomes has had, where it continually hits guys directly in the hands and they completely flub on it and it goes back the other way for 6?
You know, they laid the hammer down on Philly, no doubt, but they can't stop anyone either.
It's beautiful. That's great, though.
Exactly. That's what makes, they're like the 70s. Eric, you've been playing NBA DFS for a while?
Forever, yeah.
Okay. Do you remember the Tony Roten Sixers and the MCW Sixers?
Oh, yeah. MCW rookie of the year,
yeah.
MCW.
Yeah, like Henry Sims at center and shit. I mean, it was brutal.
It was garbage.
But if you recall correctly, or if you recall, sorry, they were so bad, right? You're talking like all-time bad, right? Tied the most, or I think they broke the record for most losses in a row, but they played at such a fast pace. I mean, the league's fastest pace, that you would just start everyone against them, but then you could also start MCW, or you could start Roten in those days. The guy was racking up triple doubles in his first game with Philly. There were actually players that made them good, even though they were so bad. So you have to be able to separate a team's overall strength or overall, win percentage from just the overall or the environment that they create for football. So yeah, Taylor Heineke's not great, Matt, and the Washington offense is probably middle of the road at this point, but this game environment has, at least in the Kansas City games we've seen, produced an insane amount of points when you have Kansas City against a bad defense, because there's no way either team can stop each other. Right.
And I mean, I don't think Taylor Heineke's Patrick Mahomes by any means, but he's been fairly productive operating this offense. He has good mobility. I mean, you just even look at his statistics over the first couple weeks. The dude's had solid ability. He went over 300 yards in week 2, and he's been over 248 at least in the last 2 weeks specifically. I know last week wasn't great with the 2 interceptions, but he still ends up throwing for 248 yards. You add in a score or two there, you're still looking at a really good score overall for DFS. And I think he can keep the game competitive enough where you like the options on the Chiefs side. I think if you want to play Heineke himself and stack him, it's all solid for this game environment. And that's all reflected in the total. It's still sky high. And the spread's actually somewhat competitive. I thought it would be higher, but right now, Kansas City -6.5, that's inside a touchdown. I did not think it was going to be this close, but bookmakers seem to project it to be.
I think our boy Ben Rasa might be hitting the Washington money line this week, as a matter of fact.
Right? I feel it coming. And I mean, it's a 55 total too. I mean, I still like the over, which is just absurd to say out loud. Terry McLaurin avoiding Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, Marshawn Lattimore is a freak. We all know that. But Taylor Heineke in some of these matchups where Terry McLaurin's free, it's just an absolute safety valve for him. You had Curtis Samuel get hurt and he was off the field for the entire second half. I don't think that helped him out either. I'm happy to write off the last game for Tyler Heineke. I think this game does completely go nuts. I don't want to go crazy with it because I know it'll be very, very chalky the closer we get to lock, but I like the over, and I do like Washington +7. I think that those are both really advantageous numbers.
I love Terry McLaurin this week, man.
It's incredible how much
He's
I
so
love him.
good.
He's
He's
so
outrageous.
good.
He was a wide receiver 2 at Ohio State, correct? He was like
Maybe.
this-
I mean, like he was on the same team as like Paris Campbell, KJ
Yeah.
Hill. Like
Go ahead, man.
he was not as utilized as he should have been there.
I'm just glad the Eagles drafted JJ Arcega-Whiteside over him. That,
I mean,
and
makes-
Jalen
he was a
Reagor
really,
last
he was
year.
a
Good
really
times.
tough evaluation because he didn't have any of the statistical production. So people thought he was bad. He was just underutilized in a scheme that's like sometimes caters to that underneath role, like the Paris Campbell role, the role that Travis Etienne is supposed to play. If you guys know what I'm saying.
sure. Oh yeah. Now look at him. Meanwhile,
Like
Arcega-White.
in his final year of college, he had less receiving yards than Paris Campbell. He had less receiving yards than KJ Hill, who I believe was a 6th round pick of the Chargers.
Wow.
He had 40 more yards than UDFA Johnny Dixon. And he played a full season.
That's crazy.
It's nuts.
Meanwhile, Arcega-Whiteside is a special teams player now, so that's good.
you should have Justin Jefferson or Terry McLaurin alongside Devonta Smith.
Oh,
How's that
God.
feel?
I know. Oh my God. But the thing is, it wouldn't have
Yeah.
worked out like that, right?
Yeah. Bust out the liquor cabinet at 11 a.m. Yeah. Because what would have happened is one of those dudes would have been insane and you never would have gotten the pick. You never would have gotten the team to ensemble this way.
Or if they did get Jefferson, they probably would have taken Micah Parsons this year.
Yeah. That would be
have been
fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dude, they would
Sign
that
up
would
for
be
that.
insane. You know what's crazy though? Not to go off on a tangent, but we all like football
This
here.
show is a tangent. What are you
It is
talking
it's a
about?
one big hour-long
Go.
tangent. You're absolutely right. Produced by Tyler Zander, by the way. Shout out to our boy Tyler. You think about it, it's all playing out perfectly because the Colts are 1-4, and normally you'd be like, well, they're going to bench Wentz. There's no way he plays 75% of snaps. But his division is so bad that they're not out of it yet. They're only 2 games back at Tennessee. And then Miami, who traded us their 1st round last year because they wanted to be a competitor this year, they look like shit. So not only will we have 3 first round picks, but Miami might be like a top 12 pick again this year that goes to us.
Yeah. I mean, you guys should be a juggernaut at this point and you're not. And that just tells you some incompetence in the front office. And, obviously getting rid of Peterson is a plus, but I don't really know what to think about everything. I do just from, again, for our purposes, fantasy wise, I mean, it's great having Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, but that team is a headache because I don't know how else you're supposed to stack them. It's just a team that I don't know where else we could find a ceiling game from Ertz or Goddard, unless the entire tight end position fails. I mean, Jalen Hurts is now going to be the hardest guy for me to stack going forward. And I love him. He was somebody that early on in the season, you looked at his 3 starts, he had 4 total, but I'm writing off week 17 last year. In his 3 starts last season, had 40 plus pass attempts and was passing way over expectation for what people expected out of him. And so I was looking forward to stacking up Philly. I just don't know how to do it anymore.
Yeah. Tune into the strategy show tomorrow with Matt Kajeski and myself, and then live before lock, deeper dive and all that. But to come full circle here, Terry McLaurin in the 2 good matchups he's had this year has dominated, absolutely dominated. And Matt's right. Taylor Heineke hasn't been that bad from a fantasy standpoint either, especially in good matchups. Are there any guys here down at the bottom, Matt, in terms of ownership or even in the middle that you look at and say, you know what, there's no reason he should be that low owned?
It's tough with it being so flat right now, but I do think there's a couple situations where you have some really high profile receivers in some matchups that are worth targeting. Like one I'll always take stabs on is these elite players that are coming under own, especially in good matchups.
Jefferson.
I was going to say DeAndre Hopkins, and health is still a concern for him. He's been banged up the entire year, and it's reflected in all of his statistics at this point. We are still talking about a 6% DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is in the 2nd best game environment of the entire slate, going up against Cleveland with a 53-point total, just narrowly behind that 55 total in the Washington, Kansas City game. And, rather than taking a bunch of 1% guys that are like wide receiver 3s, sometimes I just like to differentiate at the top with the elite players. And DeAndre Hopkins certainly has been that. The one concern I have is still the injury.
Yeah. Last week, he doesn't have a double-digit target game this year, though, yet. But last week, at least, on Kyler Murray's 28 targeted attempts, Hopkins saw 32% of that. So we still saw a much higher target share, and that's encouraging. Matt, real quick, let me stick with Matt for a second here, and then Eric, let me get some lower owned picks from you. Eric was right about Odell Beckham the other week. It pains me to say it, but he was right. I'm a man of honor, Eric. I admit when I'm wrong.
God, I got a shout out. What a morning. What a morning.
But I need to know, Matt, at basically zero ownership and a bottomed out 5K price point, are you taking any shots on Beckham, especially after seeing 89 total points scored in a Browns game last week where he was largely uninvolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can take shots now. He's not going to be owned whatsoever. So if you're taking a stance on him, how much do you really need to play him in multiple lineups? And I mean, people like to point to the 3-target game, but I mean, he was incredibly involved before that. So who's to say it doesn't go right back? I don't know. He has been extremely inefficient in his time with Cleveland. I thought a lot of that was due to injuries, but now that it's extending into this year, I think there are larger concerns with Beckham. I think the redeeming factor with him is that he's just going to be unowned. So you can take some shots on maybe the target share is not sticky. Maybe it jumps right back up. These things fluctuate week to week. So I'm not willing to completely write him off, especially when he's unowned.
Eric, I know you agree.
He's 5,100 is the reason.
Receiver.
No, okay. I'm saying that he is underachieved constantly, and he's been one of the easiest guys to fade for the last year and a half, 2-3 years even. You know, there's spots where he has these ceiling games. We had week 4 against Dallas. That one stuck out the most. He never really stays healthy. He was hurt in like week 6 or 7 last year. And that was a
rushing touchdown where he had like a 60-yard rushing touchdown.
Yeah, it was absurd. And then like a lot of, in my brain too, the Odell Beckham ceiling games are off of like Jarvis Landry bombs to him. Like it's
2 weeks ago, he should have broke the slate.
He should. Against Minnesota, a lot of people are going to break the slate. So I understand that was maybe a Baker Mayfield issue, but that has to be factored in as well. I mean, I'm not saying that he's just a terrible wide receiver. I'm just saying that for a long time, I mean, he has not had. I mean, he had Eli post Eli at the height of his powers. He's getting Baker Mayfield. That's not exactly the best 1-2 combo to have throwing you the football, but that's what we have to factor in as well. So Odell at 5,100. That's the main reason. You look at the names that are around him: Tim Patrick, Henry Ruggs, Khalif Raymond, Christian Kirk. I mean, it's laughable when you think about Odell Beckham and his name recognition and then the range that he's at. I sort of expect every single week that there's name recognition Odell Beckham ownership. I would expect him to be 5% plus just because people will start over the course of this week seeing that number. And that's when you just hit eject and you just don't play him because you can go basically anywhere else. This is still a run-first football team here. They're saying that Jarvis Landry, is probably not going to be back here yet. I mean, he doesn't have the Q tag next to him on Fantasy Cruncher, but I just think for me, Odell Beckham is just never going to be a guy that I get to until we see them try to prioritize the pass in any kind of a way, and they never will.
Or if Baker Mayfield could learn how to throw the deep ball.
That too. I
mean, really, he has 7 deep targets in 3 games. And 1 reception. One
was catchable.
One ball exactly, and he caught it.
Yep.
So go back to his first year with Baker Mayfield. He was second in the league in deep targets. He had 36 of them, behind only Kenny Golladay. And we don't need to harp on this, but every single year he gets those high value targets, and they turn into nothing. And that's what sucks. So Matt, maybe one of these days, these high quality targets will give us that 150-yard 2-touchdown game we've been champing at the bit for all these years.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, you can make positive cases and negative cases for all these players.
Sure.
Odell Beckham.
No, you can't.
Unless you're talking about Devontae Adams or like JJ Arcega-Whiteside. I mean, you can't make positive cases for him or negative cases for Adams. But these middling receivers, you can't tell me that Odell Beckham doesn't have a ceiling. You cannot tell me that he does.
I didn't say that. No,
well, I'm saying you can make a positive or a negative case for all of these receivers in this range. For Odell Beckham, he is still the wide receiver 1 for a Cleveland team facing Arizona in a game that has a 53-point total. Negatively, Odell Beckham has 2 career 100-yard games while playing with the Cleveland Browns. You can pick and choose your variables however you want. It comes down to what is his ownership going to be reflected in this game, and we don't know what that is yet.
Eric
He
called him a
has-
human shitbag. Now, I thought he went too far, and I thought you don't
did.
need to make things personal.
I didn't say that, but I did.
Like,
kind
you
of,
can argue
in a
it both
roundabout
ways,
way.
and you can pick which stats you want to
I look at
and-
fantasy points. How about fantasy points? He has 20 plus fantasy points 3 times in 2.5 years.
I said
2.5 years.
That's reflected in his price.
I'm aware. Okay, so let's take a little walk down the pricing because this is
Dude,
fun
he's
for me.
not 8K.
Would you rather play Odell Beckham or Jacoby Myers?
I don't know what their projections are or their ownership.
Okay, so Tyler Boyd, 5,400 going up against Detroit with 6.8% ownership. Would you rather play Tyler Boyd or Odell Beckham?
Boyd has
Jr.?
like a
Wait, what
0.3
is
yard
that?
ADOT.
Dude, Eric, the question for all of these guys is what is their projection versus their ownership?
Correct. Yeah,
So,
and
like,
it's also
I don't care.
It's also
who's-
just
like, I don't care
Matt.
who you think is the better player. Like, that doesn't matter to me.
You know what? I just know you and I are never going to see eye to eye on
played,
Odell
like,
Beckham. But
Have you
keep
played
playing him.
Laviska Shenault this year?
Yeah, I played him one time last week. It didn't
Okay,
go
how
well.
good do you think he is?
I think he's good. I think he can be dynamic in like a gadget role, and they just don't even utilize him like that. And he didn't see the field because apparently, I guess he snitched on Urban Meyer. I don't know what he did, but something happened to Laviska Shenault.
Oh, he played the whole game. He just was running wind sprints.
Yeah,
So
it was just
the point
it was
is-
uninvolvement.
The point is, we're willing to take shots on some of these guys if they're low owned and they have
Totally.
upside.
Totally, Matt.
I'm
I
not
understand.
saying he's good anymore.
I completely
Like, we played
completely
AJ
agree.
Green this year.
Yeah, dude, we've played I played worse than AJ Green this year. I mean, I can't even remember some of the dudes that we've kind of like thrown
Dude,
into the mix.
this isn't a good
I played
play, but
Brian Edwards last week. I mean, I'm
I
a sick
played-
person.
I played Sammy Watkins repeatedly last year because he was the wide receiver 2 for Kansas City.
Yes, you
And that
did.
brings theoretical upside. Now, it didn't get there. You can call that right or wrong, but that's the whole thesis behind the play. It's not that I think Sammy Watkins is an elite receiver.
Okay.
All right, we got to keep moving. We only have 7 minutes left, fellas.
I love you too, Eric. Nothing against this argument. It's still fun.
I think it's healthy.
I
I
don't
think
know,
it's
Matt.
healthy.
That
Somebody
sounded
said
Pretty vitriolic, if you ask
somebody
me.
said Eric needs his own show so I don't have to watch. That'd be great. I'll hang out and talk into the void. I'm fine with it.
I don't listen. I understand the argument. Frank says these guys who love OBJ are living in the past.
I don't care about him as a player. It is entirely dependent on ownership and projection.
I can tell you, Eric must be living in the future because he just hates this guy with a passion.
I do. I absolutely do.
Well, yeah. Seriously though, to finish to close out this position, Matt, what do you think with Jair Alexander out? I mean, I just have a very tough time getting to Allen Robinson at this point, and it pains me to say that because I've been riding for that guy for a while, and it has not come to fruition. But is Darnell Mooney a guy that we can actually look at and say maybe Justin Fields just really likes him in a game where for the first time in 3 weeks he's probably going to need to throw?
Yeah, it's so difficult because we're dealing with such a small sample size with Chicago, and then they haven't embraced the pass whatsoever. I think in certain game scripts, they're just going to have to out of necessity. And then at that point, who do we take a look at? Because Allen Robinson hasn't produced this year and he projects to be so low owned, and I really don't think his role is going to change that much. Like, Allen Robinson has produced ridiculous seasons with the worst quarterbacks that maybe a receiver has ever played with all time, going back to his college days. So if you can buy low on him in this situation, assuming game script's a little more favorable, I'm willing to take shots on him.
Anybody else you guys like at the low ownership at wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean, there's some guys. I was going to just ask you guys a question flat out because I don't see a name. The reason I think we're going to see Allen Robinson and Odell get some traction is because I see nothing under 5K that I'm even remotely excited to play. Mecole Hardman, the highest owned guy at 6.3% along with Mooney. I mean, those are like the only two remotely playable dudes that I see. Is there anybody under 5K you even see you want to play?
The two guys I wrote down were Mecole Hardman. I know he's not getting the same deep attempts and opportunities as Tyreek Hill, but a 15% target share on the Kansas City Chiefs offense is still, you'll take a 15% target share on the Kansas City Chiefs offense over a 25% target share on the Bears offense any day of the week. So it's Hardman and it's Darnell Mooney, the two guys that I have interest in. Yeah,
it's going to be really hard to go down to the bottom of the barrel. So, I mean, I'm looking at ceilings and I will say, if we want to talk about ceilings, my big prediction, I had two predictions coming into the season. One, that the Chargers would win the AFC West. And two, Mike Williams would be priced over 8K. And this is the first time that we've seen it. I just am in love with what Joe Lombardi's doing with this team on the offensive side of the ball. Mike Williams is out of his mind. He will never show up in the boom bust tool, but he's under 5% because it's 8,100. And we all know that he can absolutely floor out. There's Keenan Allen, there's Austin Eckler, who I absolutely love. But in terms of game environments, I mean, you have sitting at the top, you have Kansas City, Washington, and you guys said that you liked Arizona, Cleveland, but I just like the Chargers and Baltimore so much more. I think it's two defenses. I mean, I think the Chargers can be more competent defensively, but Baltimore has shown nothing to me so far in the early going. And I just really like this game in general. And if you're going to tell me I'm going to get the guy who's put up 39.5, 36.2 in two of his last three, and I'm going to get him under 5%. That's like an auto play.
I don't love Arizona, Cleveland. I wouldn't be surprised if the field overreacts to last week either with that,
It's true.
No, I don't love that game. I think there's some spots, but tight ends. Hey, rip through tight ends here. There's not a ton to talk about, Matt, but Travis Kelce, 7K.
Way too cheap.
Yeah.
Even though he has not seen the work recently and he's coming off some bad games, like it's just based on what we know about Travis Kelce in the offense he plays in, it's just too cheap. That it's either usually pay all the way down, pay all the way up for me. Eric brings up a really good point when he was talking about receivers there. We don't have a lot of these like complete layup options. I know there's some value guys for the running back position, but I think we're going to run into a lot of tough decisions, whether you want to play a guy like Travis Kelce versus one of the elite receivers or McCaffrey. You cannot play them all. But Kelce, if he's going to draw lower ownership and he comes in at a depressed price, I do have a lot of interest in that, especially in the game environment he's playing in.
Eric, I'm probably going to have some 8% Ricky Seals-Jones, to be honest with you. I know it doesn't sound great, but he played every single snap that Logan Thomas hasn't played since we went down early in week 4. He's been targeted in the red zone, and it's the Chiefs.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Ricky Seals-Jones makes a ton of sense. You've got Tyler Higbee as a guy that I'm going to be playing quite a bit, 4,400. I mean, he was playing 100% of snaps earlier. That's kind of leveled out to 75% plus the last 3 weeks. But the Giants have kind of been a little bit of a tight end funnel here. And I could see that being something where Tyler Higbee at 4,400 could make a huge difference. And we got to talk about David Njoku as well on the Cleveland side, the number one pass catcher from Cleveland, the top pass catching option for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, 3,700 here, 7 targets, 7 receptions coming out of college, out of Miami. I just remember being like, man, this guy is built different, and it never really came to fruition, but Cleveland paid him. Cleveland kept him around. They've tried to make him a thing, and it was nice to finally see something out of it. It sucks that absolutely nobody was there, but with no Jarvis Landry, with nobody else really kind of doing anything there, if Odell can pick it up, that'd be nifty as well. And maybe this is a spot for him, but 3,700 in the best game environment at 1.5%. It doesn't feel like point chasing because you don't expect 30.9 again. But, if Travis Kelce goes for 25, if Darren Waller and Mark Andrews don't completely go off, the rest of the position is wide open. And if you get 15, 16 out of your tight end under 4K, you'd probably be happy with that.
Hooper didn't see a single target last week either. I don't know how reliable Njoku is going to be from week to week, but we definitely have to mention him after last week. Matt, close out tight end for us. Anybody here for you?
Yeah, I like Njoku. I think he's a really solid player, and he has that athleticism you like at the position. I would be shocked if Ricky Seals-Jones is not a top 3 most owned tight end by the end of the week, just because of the role he played in Washington. Expect him to get steamed and talk up a lot. You just don't have you don't have tight ends with that receiving role in their offense. And we've already talked about the game environment at length, so I won't belabor that. But I do think there's a lot of really good attachments at cheaper price points. Like Jared Cook, it's a solid game environment for him as well. He continues to cede some opportunity to Donald Parham, but in that min price range, you're just going to have to try and find some pivots. And I think he could potentially be one of them. Evan Ingram, if the injuries in New York continue to add up, and we'll have to see who plays for that offense throughout the week. He still isn't super involved, but he comes in at a really cheap price point, and they're just running out of bodies overall.
All right. We got top stacks to close this one out, boys. And then, hey, you got the NHL strategy show coming up at 2:00 Eastern. Hockey tonight. I mean, play it. we got amazing content over there. We talk about it with like football and basketball, but we have ownership, player projections, the top stack tool, the lineup builder, the premium Slack chat, all of that for NHL. And if you use the promo code crosscheck, all one word, all caps, you get the entire week of everything for $3. It's 75% off. $3 for everything NHL. It's a good time to do that while you don't have regular season NBA yet. And NHL is some big prize pools. So 50K to first on DraftKings yesterday. Check it out. And if you want to get everything on the site, all of these tools built by the #1 ranked DFS player out there, Awesemo himself. I talked about them for hockey. You have them for all of the other sports, including the Boom Bust tool, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, and so much more. Use the promo code NFL Strategy Show, all one word, all caps, when you go to awesemo.com/join. Get you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That's every single sport, not just NFL. Everything on the site, NFL Strategy Show, all caps, all one word. All right, let's do it like this, boys. Top stacks, favorite top stack, and then favorite leverage stack. I'll just go first and get it out of the way, Eric, and then I'll toss it over to you. For me, it's still Kansas City. I just think with that Kelsey price point, and you say, yeah, they got ownership, but they by far have the highest top stack probability, and they still have the highest leverage score on the slate. So if that's the case on a week where I can start them, I'm there all day, no doubt about it. I feel like, as in terms of one that I want to stay away from, it's probably going to be the Baltimore stack this week. I like Baltimore. I like pieces of that, but I don't think I want to load up on like a Lamar Jackson plus 2 pass catchers. Plus, I don't know what Rashad Bateman's role is going to look like. Floor is yours.
All right. I love kind of being lighter on the Baltimore side of it. I would rather go to the Chargers side, but my team that really sticks out, and they stick out on the top stacks tool as well, is Cincinnati going up against Detroit. Joe Burrow has 3 really solid pass catchers, and I talked about being lower on Mixon than you guys. Part of it is Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins. There's a lot of different ways that you can stack this up. I think most people are absolutely going to go the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins route. They're both the 2 guys over 10%. Tyler Boyd, I still think, has some ceiling there. We saw week 4, 11 targets, 9 catches. T. Higgins was out, of course, but I think that there is definitely some upside for Joe Burrow. And right now in the top stacks tool, I mean, right now, 3.6% leverage that you're getting on him. He's under 5%. He's in a dome. It feels like it's going to be a solid game environment. This Detroit team keeps getting kicked around, having these heartbreaking losses. I think we're going to see them get eviscerated by Joe Burrow in the Cincinnati offense this week.
All right. What about you, Matt?
I still like stacking the Arizona Cardinals against Cleveland Browns. Fantastic game environment, 53-point total overall. Kyler Murray, I mean, you talk about a guy with just immense upside. I think you can stack him 2 ways. You can stack him with 1 pass catcher because of his role on the ground, and you can really do some unique stuff with him. I don't even hate playing like a Chase Edmonds in a full game stack if you're playing smaller field tournaments here. But then there's just players at all price points. You could take Hopkins. You can take cheaper options like AJ Green. There's so much you can do with him. And I think if you are running back players on the other side, a lot of unique options you can use with like Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and some of the pass catchers for Cleveland too in a great game environment.
Any spots you don't like, Matt?
For like if among the positively leveraged pieces?
No,
you mean?
Among the higher owned low leverage stacks.
One that's really surprising to me is Washington coming in as low as they are. I think it just has to do with Heineke's too cheap and a lot of people are going to play him. But I still think there's probably some unique ways you can build out a full game stack with Washington, even though they have the negative leverage score. That was the biggest surprise to me. That was one I actually was thinking about stacking earlier in the week, but now this negative leverage score has me a little weary.
Yeah, me too. But man, Heineke, Seals, Jones, and McLaurin opens up a lot. You're right, though. There's going to be a lot of ownership. And then it's probably going to funnel a lot of the same high-priced guys into those lineups as well. So,
and I mean, McLaurin and Ricky Seals Jones, who else would you go to? Humphreys?
Oh, Adam Humphreys season.
But that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, you're going to probably end up with the same stack. And then it gives you that ability to run it back with either of the top Kansas City guys, because it's just such a cheaper stack. And then you could probably add a Devontae Adams. I just think that the Kansas City stacks, given the restrictions and salary, is going to make lineups look a lot different. We'll see.
Yeah, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that'll do it for us. Thanks for always hanging out. We had, 520, 530 people watching at the top. So that's amazing on a Wednesday morning. We appreciate all of you. If you haven't done so, hit that thumbs up on your way out. Subscribe to the channel. Follow Eric at Eric Lindquist, Matt at Matt_Gajeski, me at Laffy_D. See that yellow right there under our heads? That's where you can find us over on the Twitters. Be nice, talk shit, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Interact, engage. It's fun. We'll see you over there. And of course, check out Awesemo.com. NFL Strategy Show, all one word, for 25% off a whole week of everything, and cross-check for, a full week of NHL content for only $3. We'll see you back here soon. Peace.
One.